Hi, welcome to day 408. It's funny, I pushed the record button and it still surprised me when the recording started. I want to talk to you today just about some of the things that we read in Nti Hebrews in the last week. I'm going to start with Nti Hebrews Chapter 8. It's about halfway through the verses 3 to 6. It says, Jesus does not speak in words when he speaks clearest to the mind that is your heart. Jesus speaks as a knowing. And because it is a knowing that you know, you realize in your knowingness that this knowing is a knowing that is true. Follow it to your truth and its knowingness. The voice without words leads you there. This has been my experience with truth realization. When I started my spiritual path, the day I started, there was kind of a calling. It happened on the Disney cruise. Some of you may have heard this story, where I was saying this prayer, and then this calling came down over me. It was a calling to surrender at that point. And that's when I said that prayer: I will learn whatever you want me to learn. I will do whatever you want me to do. Just make me useful for the rest of my life. A couple months after that, I think that was in April, right around July 2nd, July 3rd, I started having visions. These visions came while I was contemplating the lessons in A Course in Miracles workbook, and the visions were teaching me. And then, of course, there was this vision I had in November of that year, which was the beginning of the calling. That was the handing out of the candles vision. That was the beginning of the calling to write for Spirit and teach for Spirit. And the very next day, I began to hear an inner voice. And I was able to become what I called a scribe. I was able to write down what that inner voice said. And of course, that's how the Holy Spirit's interpretation of the New Testament got written. That's how the thoughts of awakening got written. That's how the teachings of Inner Ramana got written. But one day during this period when I was a scribe and I was hearing this inner voice, which of course is words, I'm hearing words, I'm writing down the words that I hear. I remember I was vacuuming our guest room in North Carolina. And as I was vacuuming, this inner voice came in and started talking to me. And it told me that one day it would have to go away. I don't remember if it told me why or anything. I just remember that it told me one day it would have to go away. And I realize now there are a couple of reasons for that. And it did go away, by the way. It primarily went away after the teachings of Inner Ramana were written. And the reason it had to go away that I'm aware of is twofold. One, as long as I was continuing to have these words come into my mind and write them down, there was this perception that it was coming from an other. You know, it's funny because throughout NTI, Holy Spirit keeps saying, I am you, right? But there is still this feeling that I am listening to an other. So hearing in words in that way kind of keeps duality in place. But the other reason that I'm aware of that the words needed to end is because words are form. They're symbols. And the truth is not form. The truth is not symbols. So when truth realization strikes, that insight, that knowing strikes, it has nothing to do with words. That's what this paragraph says. And that's what Leo talked about in our video this past weekend. He talked about how the problem with self-inquiry is that people expect the answer to come in words. The answer does not come in words. That's what this says. It's a knowing that you know, and you realize in your knowingness that this knowing is a knowing that's true, but it's not in words. Truth realization is not in words. Verses 7-12 goes on. This is the truth that you must know, because it is written on your heart and cannot be unknown there. All dreams must pass away. Although we do an excellent job of denying this fact, the truth is we do know that everything in form is temporary, including this body, this person. We know that. This is inherent knowledge. So it's somewhat crazy, somewhat foolish to cling to anything in form, because nothing in form is going to last. I was walking my dog with a young man a couple weeks ago, and we were walking through a graveyard, and he was reading some of the tombstones, which I like to do too. That's fun. But, we noted that some of the tombstones, people were still coming and putting flowers, and you could tell by the date, people had not been there that awful long, maybe sometimes 5 years or so, but not that awful long. And then, of course, there were a lot of grave sites that you could tell nobody put flowers there anymore. And some of them were, of course, quite a bit older. The person had been gone longer. And I mentioned to him, I said, about 50 years after we're gone, in most cases, there's nobody that remembers us. By then, our children maybe are gone within that period. Our grandchildren might even be gone. At least let's stretch that out to 75 years. Pretty soon there's nobody left that remembered us. All of our lives are like the, what's that thing called that the Buddhist monks do, that round thing where they make that beautiful, beautiful art out of sand, and then they can just, after spending hours and hours and hours making it, they just wipe it away. That's what our lives are like. That's what form is like. And even though we like to deny that, we try to deny that, we also know it's true. So all dreams must pass away. If you are to pass beyond dreams, you must not pass away with them. The only way to not pass with them is not to be attached as they pass away on their own. Well, this is somewhat symbolic because, of course, the true self never passes away, and the false self always passes away. So it's not like you can take something that's going to pass away, like the false self, and make it live forever. Or it's not like the true self can pass away because it was attached to dreams. So this is somewhat symbolic. But what this really means is, if you're to awaken to that true self that is eternal and does not pass away, you can't have your attention on the dream. You can't be attached to that which does have a beginning and an end. And of course, this is what we're practicing during the loving consciousness meditation. We're practicing keeping our attention with the formless, which does not pass away. And this is what Leo talked about too. He talked about your job now is to separate the form from the formless and focus on the formless. So this is our job. We're detaching from form, detaching from placing, I'm going to call it undeserving value. Not that there isn't some value. I mean, I would say hold your value lightly. For example, this is a cup of water. And, I live in Colorado. And this body, if it doesn't get enough water, it gets dehydrated and it gets headaches. It doesn't feel well. So I have a goal of drinking 2 or 3 of these cups of water per day. And sometimes I drink more, but at least 2 or 3. I pay attention. Am I drinking enough water? So I put some value on that, put some value on keeping the body healthy. But at the same time, that value is light as compared to the value I place on the true self. One has eternal value, one has temporary value. Right? It's that clarity. That's the clarity that we need. This is the truth you must practice within your dreams. See yourself letting go of every person, every concept, and everything. Be willing to hold on to nothing, and you are willing to awaken from dreams. I call this the right use of imagination. We practice noticing that this person could be gone from our experience. I can still be aware of the true self and be happy. Allow that to be as it is. This includes our spouses, our parents, our children. And in fact, it goes on to say, take this opportunity to be honest and exercise with yourself. What is it that you do not want to let go of? That's where you're clinging to dreams. That's where you're putting the value of real and eternal on something temporary. And this doesn't mean that I don't love my daughter, because I do. It just means that I don't place the value of permanent happiness on her existence, especially her existing in a certain way, meeting my expectations in my life. She's one of the greatest joys of this experience of this life. And yet there's this knowing that this whole life is not what's eternal. This relationship with her is not what's eternal. This is a temporary experience, a wonderful one, a wonderful one. It's a temporary experience. Staying clear on that, and staying clear on what is eternal and what I am and what she is. She's that same eternal nothing that I am. This is the eternal nothing temporarily appearing as the something. We enjoy the something, but we love the nothing. We put the value on the nothing that makes the something. The value's on the Play-Doh, remember. Nti Hebrews Chapter 9 talked a little bit about 2 covenants, the first and second covenant. The first covenant, sameness. The second covenant, oneness. The golden rule, which most people know, is a rule of sameness. Treat others as you would like to be treated. That's a wonderful rule. That's a wonderful rule. Treat others as you would like to be treated. Give them respect, give them a listening ear. If they need help, give them help, right? If you like to be paid well, pay your employees well, right? Treat others as you like to be treated. But that's a rule of sameness. And that keeps otherness in place. A kinder, gentler otherness, but otherness just the same. And so at some point, we move from I'll call it combative, conflictual, judging separation into gentle separation when we move into sameness. But at some point, we need to move beyond that into oneness. And that again comes from focusing on the eternal, loving consciousness, realizing what's real, what's unchanging. It's through focusing on that we come to know oneness, which is beyond sameness, because there's no other in the oneness of consciousness. It says, Jesus is the symbol of light for you because he seemed to give his life and yet he did not die. This is the symbol that you may give up your self-will and yet you will not die. Now, of course, I was the scribe and the first student of Nti, and I put a lot of value on Jesus. Some of you may not, depends maybe on your tradition, but I put a lot of value on Jesus. I mean, Jesus was the kingpin spiritual symbol, right? And what I was taught from within is that by having Jesus up on this pedestal, a pedestal that I was not up on, I was keeping that otherness, that separation alive. And in order to realize oneness, I had to realize that I am first the same as Jesus and then one with Jesus. It kind of went in that order. Jesus is the symbol of light for you because he seemed to give his life and yet he did not die. Right? He was a strong symbol for me. But then it says, stories of the world are helpful. So the story of Jesus was helpful for me, but only to the extent the stories are understood to be dreams. I can't give Jesus, listen carefully, the reality or the value of reality. I can't give Jesus the value of reality. Just as I can't give Regina the value of reality or the daughter the value of reality. Because Jesus was a temporary man that had a beginning and an end. What's real for Jesus is also what's real for me, what's real for my daughter, what's real for all things. And that's where the value goes. So stories of the world are helpful, but only to the extent that the stories are understood to be dreams. To pass from this world to the awakening, the mind of Jesus released faith in the stories of the dream. In this release, the idea of Jesus died. The idea of Jesus died for the one we call Jesus. Just as the idea of Regina needs to die for this one. But if I hold to Jesus as a very special, real being that is not me, I'm holding to separation. So to realize oneness, I have to let go of Jesus and I have to let go of Regina and give value to that which we are. Reserve worship for God, for consciousness, for the truth that we all are. As you accept Jesus as separate from you, you choose to limit yourself to the perception of the first covenant, sameness. All you can be is a really nice person. As you choose to accept Jesus as a symbol of all that is true about you, you choose to rise within yourself to the acceptance of the new covenant, oneness. That takes us into Hebrews chapter 10, which kind of jumps onto a different topic. It talks about guilt. Because I felt a lot of guilt. Again, I was the scribe and the first student. I felt a lot of guilt. I wasn't good enough, right? I wasn't good enough. I was guilty for not being good enough. It says the guilt that you feel feels eternal within your soul. And it did. It felt like the most true part of me. The most true part of me was the guilt of not being good enough. The guilt that you feel feels eternal within your soul, but it is not. The guilt that you feel rises repeatedly into your awareness for one reason. It rises as a reminder of your desire to heal. So we've talked about this. As we go along this spiritual path, anything that is not true rises up to be let go of. And so what was happening for me clearly as this was being written was there was a lot of guilt coming up. And I needed to shift from seeing the guilt as being a true statement about me, a true statement being I'm guilty of not being good enough, to seeing it as a calling to free myself of this belief so that I could move into realizing myself as the same as Jesus first, and then one with Jesus second. But I can't see myself as the same as Jesus if I continue to cling to the idea that I am not good enough. He's on the pedestal. I'm not. Not only am I not good enough, but I will never be good enough. So this guilt that's keeping me away from rising in consciousness to realize first sameness with Jesus and then oneness, this guilt has to come up. I have to practice superconductor with it, or rest, accept, and trust with it. I have to allow it to be. It's the only way I'm going to move from this perception of separation to truth. It says, you have not healed yourself because you do not fully recognize your desire to heal. You remain somewhat distracted by dreams, but your attention is turning from the distraction you have made to the desire for the remembrance of God. So as we become more deeply committed to our goal of awakening, our purpose of awakening, then we become more willing to let this purification occur, this arising of false beliefs, false ideas, and letting them go through the superconductor process. But as we value the world, the person and the world, we keep believing these judgments that keeps all of this stuff in place. So another important reason for shifting value from the world, from the thoughts to the formless, is because shifting value from the world is also shifting value from these false beliefs, because they're a part of the world. And as we shift to the formless, we can then abide as the formless, abide as the watching, while these things rise up and disappear. Rest the desire that you recognize dying within you. That's the desire to be the person in the world. Rest that desire. Just kind of let it soften. When you notice your attention is strongly on something about the person in the world, just kind of let it soften. Shift to noticing your isness awareness and put the value there. We've been practicing that all week. Focus on the desire that is growing to realize yourself as the eternal, as the isness awareness. The practice of remembrance is the practice of awakening. This is something we just practice. These walkabout practices that we've been doing are so important. Focus daily within every moment on true prayer, which is the prayer of the heart. And of course, as you know, if you forget, as soon as you notice you've forgotten, you come back to the practice. Stay with the walkabout practices to the best of your ability. God is love. This is the truth that is known within your heart. So the only one that's judging you for, quote, not being perfect at the practices is you. God isn't judging you. All that the God nature wants is for you, when you notice that you've forgotten the practices, just return. We learned this all the way back in Nti Matthew. That's all that's asked of us. When you notice you've forgotten the walkabout exercise of the day, just return to the exercise at that moment. That's all that's asked of you. So God is love. This is the truth that is known within your heart. Know this truth by sinking within your mind to the heart. Practice, enjoy. The truth is true, and it remains as always true. You are as you have always been. Love leads you always, even unto the remembrance of yourself. So that's what I have to share today. I will say the self-inquiry video that we watched with Leo this weekend, in my humble opinion, is an excellent video. Of course, always disregard his comments about psychedelics. I don't support that. I don't think that's helpful, and I would not want to put anybody in that position. It might not turn out well for you at all. But the way he talks about self-inquiry, the way he teaches self-inquiry is really wonderful. And that's going to help you with your focus on the loving consciousness meditation. This week, we're going to continue with Nti Hebrews. And at the end of the week, we will move into Nti James. And in fact, your assignment this week will be listening to 2 audios teaching from Nti James chapters 1 and Nti James chapter 2. Of course, you'll have walkabout exercises this week. We're going to really be looking at our faith and where we're placing our faith this week. And you'll continue with the loving consciousness meditation. So that's it for now. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next week. Bye.